This is a News 4 special presentation. Decision 2017, the Virginia Governor's Debate. Democrat Ralph Northam and Republican Ed Gillespie face off for your vote in a high-stakes race drawing national attention. Live from Capital One headquarters in McLean, here's NBC News political director and moderator of Meet the Press, Chuck Todd.
Good evening. I am Chuck Todd, and welcome to the Virginia gubernatorial debate between the Democratic Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam and Republican nominee Ed Gillespie. It's hosted by the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University, and, of course, NBC4. This debate is airing on all NBC stations across the state of Virginia, nationally on C-SPAN, and streaming live on the NBC Washington app. Let me begin quickly by covering the rules of today's event. The debate will last 1 hour and will begin with 2-minute opening statements from each candidate. Then, our panelists and myself will pose questions directly to the candidates. I should note these questions are determined by NBC News and the panelists and have not been reviewed by the candidates or the Northern Virginia Chamber. Each candidate will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond, and the candidate answering first will have an additional 1-minute rebuttal. As moderator, I reserve the right to follow up as needed. And finally, we will conclude the debate with 1-minute closing statements as well. There is a timekeeper who will notify the candidates of their remaining time and when time has expired. In the interest of trying to cover as much ground as possible, we ask the candidates to adhere to these time limits that they wanted, so we're here. Now, let me welcome our panelists. Julie Carey is News 4's Northern Virginia Bureau Chief and has been covering Virginia politics for NBC4 for over 20 years. We've done this rodeo before. Aaron Gilchrist anchors News 4 Today, weekday mornings on NBC4. He spent more than a decade reporting in Richmond and has covered 4 Virginia governors, and again, a veteran of these debates. And Dr. Mark Rozell is Dean of the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University, and he has been writing and commenting on Virginia politics for over 30 years. And now, let's bring the candidates in. Republican, Ed Gillespie, and Democrat, the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam. You can give a little applause, because this is the last time I'm going to ask you to do that. I know these two nominees are going to make the state of Virginia proud, but after that, I would hope the audience doesn't participate as much, but that was good. Mr. Gillespie, you won the coin toss, and with that, your 2-minute opening statement. You get to go first.
Thank you very much. Ralph, it's good to be with you again, and it's great to be here with all of you and for those watching at home. Appreciate you making time to talk about this critically important election. Virginia's at a crucial juncture. The fact is, our economic growth rate for the past 6 years has been below the national GDP rate. That was never the case. We used to always lead, and now we are lagging. Our growth rate last year was 0.6%, making us 39th out of 50 states in economic growth. And in wage growth, we were at 1.7% stagnation, making us 44th out of 50 states in wage growth. The fact is, when it comes to economic growth and job creation and wages, Virginia should be first in the nation, and we can be with the right policies. The policies I put forward would result in the creation of more than 53,000 new, additional, full-time, good-paying private sector jobs across our Commonwealth. That's a 25% increase over current projections. We need those jobs, and we need those opportunities to make sure the next generation does better than the generation that came before us. Let me tell you why that's so important to me. My father came to this country as a boy because his father found work in America as a janitor. My parents never went to college, but they insisted that I do, and I took out student loans. I worked my way through school, and eventually I got to serve as counselor to the President of the United States of America. From immigrant janitor to West Wing of the White House in 2 generations' time, I want to make sure Virginia families have those kinds of opportunities. My opponent, the Lieutenant Governor, is a good man, and I appreciate his service to our country and to our Commonwealth. But I don't believe his policies will be good for us. In fact, I think they're wrong for us, and that my policies will be better for us. If our next governor does not respond with a sense of urgency to the challenges we face as a Commonwealth and the right policies, we will fail our fellow Virginians. I have the right policies, I have that sense of urgency, and I will not fail us.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gillespie. Dr. Northam.
Well, good evening, and thanks to Capital One for sponsoring this debate, and thanks to you, Chuck, and Julie, Aaron, and Mark. We appreciate you being panelists. You know, we're in the midst of a technology revolution right here in Virginia, and it's time to ignite Virginia with innovation, to create ecosystems that will support small businesses and startup companies. I look forward tonight to letting you know my vision on how Virginia once again will become the #1 state in the country in which to do business. Our administration has brought in a record-setting over 215,000 new jobs to the Commonwealth of Virginia, over $16 billion of capital investment. Our unemployment rate has gone from 5.4 to 3.8%, the lowest it's been in 9 years, and our wages and salaries are up over 12%. There is a distinct contrast between the two of us on how we plan to drive Virginia's economy. It starts with bringing skills to jobs, workforce development, making sure that all jobs in Virginia are good jobs. We need to make sure that our children have access to a world-class education system. No individual, no family should be one medical illness away from financial demise. We need to live in environments where the air and water are clean and in safe and inclusive communities where there are not guns on every street corner. My life has been one of service. I grew up on Virginia's Eastern Shore on a small farm. I'm the product of public schools, went to Virginia Military Institute, and then Eastern Virginia Medical School. I took a commission in the United States Army, serving 8 years. I served during Desert Storm, taking care of wounded soldiers. I've had the privilege of taking care of sick children and their families for over 25 years. Serving in the Virginia Senate, I passed the smoking ban in restaurants and also concussion protection for our student athletes. I understand the the Virginia way, and I look forward to sharing my vision on how we take Virginia to the next level. Thank you so much.
All right. Let's dive right in. Mr. Gillespie, I'm going to begin with you. We received hundreds of questions through Facebook from Virginia voters and concentrated it, so it was only open to Virginia voters. And you might not be surprised, one topic has come up more than any, front and center, and it has to do with last month's violence in Charlottesville, which of course prompted a national debate about Confederate monuments. Now, you and Mr. Northam have taken two very different positions on the subject. You believe they should stay with proper historical context added. Mr. Northam supports their removal. I'm going to ask you both a form of this question, but here's how Matt Prater of Saltville, Virginia writes it to you, Mr. Gillespie. He calls it government promotion equals government endorsement. So by displaying these Confederate statues, are cities and localities endorsing what those statues stand for, and why shouldn't they belong in a museum alone?
You know, Virginia and Virginians have always been at the forefront of American history from our very founding, literally, at Jamestown. That doesn't mean we've always been on the right side of history. And when you're on the side of preserving the institution, the evil institution of slavery, you're on the wrong side of history. But our history is our history, and I believe that we need to educate about it and that we need to teach about it. And so my view is that the statues should remain, and we should place them in historical context so that people can learn. We don't have to glorify the objects of the statues. We can educate about them. We have to learn from history, and that is a difference. That's my view, is that we should maintain the statues. The VMI just voted, the Board of Visitors, to keep the statues up. I know the Lieutenant Governor has said he would do everything in his authority as governor to have the Jackson statue come down, as well as the Lee statue in Richmond, and would be a vocal advocate for the cities and counties for taking their statues down. I believe the cities and counties should, better spend their money on improving our schools, law enforcement, teachers, and that is a significant difference. And so I would maintain the state-controlled statues, and I would encourage the cities and counties not to take down their statues, because I don't think it's the best use of their tax dollars. So the fact is, I do support keeping the statues up and teaching about our history, and that is the difference between us.
Mr. Northam, in your 90-second response, I want to add what James Newman of Charlottesville wrote as regarding this issue. He said, quote, "Confederate statues are part of our heritage. They are part of our narrative," referring to the state of Virginia. So why should they be removed from the public square where it is an opportunity to learn history?
Yes, thank you, Chuck. Several years ago, Pam and I took our daughter Aubrey to the University of Virginia. We took her there thinking that and knowing that she would be safe and that she would have a wonderful education and make great relationships. And what we watched a month ago in Charlottesville was a horrific tragedy, a group of white supremacists who rolled into Charlottesville in a beautiful city, a beautiful, wonderful University of Virginia, with torches and banners and semi-automatic weapons to do nothing more than spew hatred and bigotry and violence. We lost 3 individuals because of that. And my response would be that if these statues give individuals, white supremacists like that, an excuse to do what they did, then we need to have a discussion about the statues. And that's what I have said. Personally, I would think that the statues would be better placed in museums with certainly historical context, but I am leaving that up to the localities, just as I left it up to the Board of Visitors in Lexington at VMI, where I went to school. I think, though, what is important is to talk about some of the statues that aren't built of bronze, the inequities that we still have in our society, the inequities in access to health care, inequities in access to voting rights, inequities that we have in education. You know, that was an awakening, what we saw in Charlottesville. There's still a tremendous amount of hatred and bigotry in this country and in this state, and I was proud to be in Charlottesville and stand up for what it was. And I would ask Ed Gillespie to ask the President of the United States to do the same thing, that call it for what it is. This was hatred and bigotry. We don't condone that in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Don't make me be a school marm on time. I want to try not to do that. I want to try. Mr. Gillespie, you got 60 seconds.
You know, the fact is, what we saw in Charlottesville on August 12th was horrific. And let's be clear about a couple things. These people were in Virginia, but they are not of Virginia. 90% of them came from outside of our Commonwealth. I know my fellow Virginians. We are caring, loving people who are respectful of one another. And let's be clear about something else. They called it a Unite the Right rally. These people are not on any legitimate spectrum of left to right. These neo-Nazis, these white supremacists, these KKK members with their shields and their torches. If one were the most liberal on a spectrum and 10 were the most conservative, these people are a yellow. They're not on the same continuum. Theirs is not a political philosophy. It is a twisted mindset rooted in hate that believes that some people are lesser than others, that one race is superior than another, and that another religion is inferior to yours. If that's your view, that is worse than immoral. That is the presence of evil in our world, and we must confront it and reject it, and as governor, I would always do so.
Thank you. Mr. Gillespie, I want to follow up really quickly here. 30 seconds, additional time for you. Why should the state have the final say and not a local municipality? I know what the law says, but are you comfortable with having the final say over what Charlottesville wants to do?
In Virginia, Chuck, there are certain statutes that the state does have jurisdiction over, and the lieutenant governor would take those down. I would keep those up.
Right. Why do you?
For example, the Board of Visitors has the jurisdiction over VMI, and the governor appoints all the members of the Board of Visitors, very public college and university, and they would, obviously reflect his view that the statute should come down at VMI. I would hope they would reflect my view that they should not. So I'm talking about the state statutes. And I would encourage, as I said, the localities that I don't think they should spend the dollars. $10 million is the estimate in Richmond. I've talked to Richmonders to move those statutes, take them down, in a $3 million loss in annual revenue that a lot of Richmonders believe would be better spent on improving the public schools here, law enforcement, safety, and other priorities.
All right, I'm going to move to our first question. Julie, you have the first question there from the panel. Go ahead.
Mr. Northam, you have said that you would support the Atlantic Coast Pipeline that's slated to run through Virginia if it's deemed environmentally responsible. Now, we know recently the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, said that its environmental impact would be what they termed less than significant. So that appears to be the green light you've been looking for. So will you say now, once and for all, that you support this pipeline?
Well, I think, Julie, first of all, we have to talk about economic development in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And as I said in my opening statement, our unemployment rate has gone to 3.8%. But if you go to the Eastern Shore, where I'm from, or the south side of Virginia, or the Southwest, it's nowhere near 3.8%. So how do we bring businesses, how do we bring manufacturers into rural Virginia? And one of the top priorities that they have, Julie, is the cost of energy. So we need to keep that in mind. As far as the pipelines, I have been very clear in what I have said. I believe that we should be environmentally responsible. I grew up on the Eastern Shore. The Chesapeake Bay was literally my backyard. I have done a lot to improve the health of the Chesapeake Bay. So we need to make sure that if these pipelines